pleasure to see such a wonderful turnout tonight. And I was thinking how appropriate it is to be holding this particular discussion right here at the Congregational Church, which has been such a leader on this issue. I can remember when the McCutcheon decision came down a couple of years ago and Peggy Erickson put the word out, we got to march. And boy, we all gathered right here at this church, and a number of the people who are here tonight were there, and we all marched down the street shouting about the Supreme Court's latest shameful decision. So it's a real pleasure to be able to introduce David Cobb. We have been friends for many years, and I recall a time when we were at the run-up to the World Trade Organization talks here in Seattle. Some of you may remember that. How many of you were out on the streets for that event? Yes, okay. And I was asking David, how do you get a sort of ordinary American excited about trade rules? And kind of like imagine meeting a guy in the bar in Texas. David was living in Texas at the time and is now living in Austin yet again. And he said, oh, it's easy. And I said, really? Tell me how you do that. And he said, well, I kind of sidle up and I say, hi, and how's it going? How's it going? And pretty soon, he's talking about his financial woes, and then you sort of say something about why he's got those woes. And pretty soon, you're talking about non-tariff trade barriers. And as he explained that to me in such ordinary American language with a Texas twang, I knew we have a movement leader in David Cobb. This guy can talk to anybody, and that's what it takes. So fast forward to 2004. So David Cobb ran for president as the Green Party candidate and rattled a lot of cages on that one. And one of the outcomes of that was that he had standing as a presidential candidate to call for a recount of the Ohio vote. Some of you may remember that was a really questionable vote, and it turned the election, and probably unfairly so. So the recount, unfortunately, just validated that George Bush had won, but it also shone a light on the unfair practices that were going on under Ken Blackwell in Ohio, where people in minority neighborhoods had to line up for 7 hours in order to vote because there weren't enough polling places, there weren't enough days, and that really helped expose a access to voting problem that remains with us to this day. So now let's fast forward again to 2009. And here we have the run-up to the infamous decision of the Supreme Court on Citizens United. And a lot of people in some circles were watching that pretty closely. And what it meant was that on January 21st, 2010, when that decision came down, the same day, Move to Amend put up a website. They were ready. And Dave and I were among the first to sign up. Yes, the only way we're going to turn this around is with a citizen movement that results in a constitutional amendment. A really audacious thought, some thought that was poo-pooed by many, but less and less so as the evidence of the effects of that decision have rolled out before our eyes. Now, one of the things you'll notice about the three things I've just mentioned, the trade rules, the voter access, the money in politics, is they are all very large issues that have cascading effects on everything we care about. So whether you care about inequality or climate change or jobs or coal trains or GMOs, the same set of biases are built in to the problems that we have at that level. So David takes on these really big issues because he knows they're foundational to so much else that we care about. And what underlies them all is, of course, democracy. And as he was just saying at the reception a few minutes ago, what we have on our hands and what we need to grow and grow is a democracy movement. And if anybody can help lead that movement, it is David Cobb. Thank you, David.
That is so sweet. Thank you. I bet I'm blushing because I certainly feel that way. Thank you, Fran. That was so lovely. And I also really want to extend also my deep gratitude for being in this church and in this congregation, because the Reverend, everywhere I go, I learn something. And here's something that I learned is that the first congregation actually helped to nurture the American Revolution. So for those of you who are members of this church, you have a very proud legacy to live up to. Think about that. So I'm challenging you from jump, as we say where I'm from. So it is true that I ran for president of the United States, and it's true that I'm a lawyer by training, but I really think of myself as just an engaged citizen. You know, as a lawyer, I've sued corporate polluters. As a citizen, I've lobbied elected officials. I've organized protests and demonstrations and teach-ins. I have run for office myself, President of the United States, but also I ran for Attorney General in Texas, where I pledged to use that office to revoke the charters of corporations that were routinely violating health, safety, public interest, environmental protection laws. And I've been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience. Okay, right. I always know I'm in the right crowd when that's the applause line. Okay, he ran for president. He got arrested. And I say that because I really want to be crystal clear and actually very humble when I say I use every tool and tactic available to create a peaceful, just transition away from a racist, sexist, class-oppressive, ecologically destructive society that I live in, and towards a peaceful, just, democratic, compassionate, and loving society. And I'm going to make sure to the best of my ability to include love and compassion into the conversation and into the political conversation, because I know that's actually what as human beings we're actually motivated by. It's what we actually want. So I can have the talk about tariff agreements, and I'm so honored you remember that conversation, Brad. And I can, and you can learn to get the conversation into policy issues. But one of the things that David in his books, David Corton, Fran's husband, has helped me to understand is policy arguments are not actually going to build a movement. We need to speak from our sense of values, and we need to speak from a deeper frame, and we need to understand that human beings do not actually make decisions based on a calculated analysis of what is the best policy. Actually, human beings understand the world through the stories we tell each other. So I submit to you that we need to start telling the story of how it came to be that unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs have stolen our sacred right to sovereign self-government, and that we are going to peacefully take it back. you something. When I start with that story, I can give that story at a Unitarian congregation or a First congregation. I can give it at a union hall. I can give it at an Occupy encampment. And I've done it at all those places. And you know what? I get laughter, I get applause, just like I got from you. And you know what? I can tell that story at Tea Party groups. And I get laughter and I get applause. Now, the laughter and applause comes at totally different places. But it can come, right? We can build commonality with people that seem like they may not actually be our allies if we're actually willing to talk from our deep frame and values. Because I have news for you, the Tea Party folks love their children and grandchildren too. They actually are trying to be part of an America that they want to be part of. And here's something that I want you to think about for a moment. Imagine this. First, the big movement that's happening now that I want to lift up and say out loud, Black Lives Matter. Very proud of that. And very proud that Move to Amend is actually learning from the techniques and the strategies and the narrative. I mean, it's a very powerful thing. So, Black Lives Matter. And two other very successful, very big, very important movements, Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party. And if you can imagine, for those of you who are teachers, you'll know what a Venn diagram is, right? Circles. Circles, intersecting circles. I want you to think about this circle here as the Tea Party. And what is the Tea Party angry about? Government, or as they say where I'm from, government. Government, right? And then I want you to imagine another circle here intersecting called the Occupy movement. And what is Occupy angry about? Why, it's in their name, Wall Street, right? And now I want you to imagine those circles and how they intersect in that sweet spot of solidarity where there is a profound reality that Wall Street has taken over government and government is passing policies that actually benefit Wall Street. I submit to you that if we take out the racist, xenophobic, small minority of the Tea Party that's very loud but actually is a minority, if you take them out of the Tea Party equation and you take out the burn it down crowd of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is equally a small minority, which, by the way, let's just acknowledge that it seems like the left wants to paint the Tea Party as nothing but a bunch of racist xenophobes, and the right wants to paint the Occupy movement as nothing but a bunch bomb throwers, right? But if you actually talk to each of those groups, what you'll find at their core is a commonality. And a commonality that actually recognizes that even if we disagree on policy proposals, that we actually have an agreement that the system is broken. Actually, as my friend Ben Cohen has taught me to say, the system isn't broken, it's fixed. So, you know, I have to give Ben credit because I know David and Ben are also friends, and it might get back to him that I stole his line. I feel really bad. I feel like this whole presentation ought to be giving now actually ought to be one big asterisk, but this is David Corton's work told through a Texas twang, right? Because, you know, the When Corporations Rule the World was the book. And actually, David, I kind of got a bone to pick with you now that I think about it, because I was a successful trial lawyer on my way to making a whole bunch of money when I read When Corporations Rule the World. 4 years later, I'd quit my law practice and was doing this. David Corton, I don't know whether to shake your hand or punch you in the nose. Maybe both. But listen. The reality is that it is, as Fran said, Move to Amend actually was founded and was a result of the outrageous Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission case. There's no doubt about that. And I'm proud to tell you it's true. In 2009, actually, I saw that case in the lower courts, and I knew it was going to be bad. After all, the Roberts Court had already gutted the Brown versus Board of Education cases, and if you're not following it, actually the core holding of Brown versus Board of Education is no more. They are literally recreating government-sanctioned segregation in public education in this country, and we don't have a legal remedy for it because of the Roberts Court. I could actually go down the list of the ways that this Robert Court has been the most activist court in the history of anybody who is old enough. You have to go back to the Lochner era to find a court that was as willing to overturn democratically enacted laws, which is to say judicial activism, when a court imposes its will over the legislative democratic process. So I knew it was going to be bad, and in fact, I'm proud to say that myself and several others with the Program on Corporations, Law and Democracy, Democracy Unlimited of Humboldt County, Reclaim Democracy, you're getting a theme here, right? All these democracy organizations filed an amicus brief, which is called a Friend of the Court brief in the lower court, or to the Supreme Court, to say, even though we're not a litigant or a participant in this case, we have information for you. Now, we weren't the only ones. Here's a little bit of judicial trivia for you. More amicus briefs were filed in the Citizens United decision than any case in the history of the Supreme Court. That's how important many of us knew that the Citizens United case was. But here's something that makes those small group unique. Our amicus was the only amicus that said, yes, you should support the lower court's decision on Hillary the movie and the campaign finance law, and the court should revisit the entire notion of corporate constitutional rights, because this legal doctrine is actually illegitimate, because it actually gives power to the courts that the people are supposed to have. It was a direct legal challenge to the very notion of corporate constitutional rights and money as speech. And we knew that the court was not going to listen to it, but we also knew that when something happens that's really big and really bad, it gives you an opportunity to set a frame. And that if we let and I'm going to say with humility, the big DC-based groups that do great work on policy issues, but if we let the policy wonks get a hold of the Citizens United case, they were going to turn it into another just money in elections moment, when we knew that it was bigger than that. That we knew that this was about who rules in this country. We knew it was about the core foundational aspect of sovereignty and self-government and the illegitimate idea that corporations have constitutional rights. Because let me tell you something. If a corporation has constitutional rights, you know what that means? It means unelected, unaccountable corporate lawyers can go into court and overturn any law that we work our butts off to pass. Environmental protection laws, worker safety laws, public health laws, campaign finance laws. It means literally we can't actually have economic democracy. They have made it illegal. Why? Because you see, if you're asserting a constitutional right, you're saying that some action of government is illegitimate. And I want to be very explicit and clear. I am a civil libertarian. You, and by you I mean the person occupying the seat or the pew that you're in right now, you have constitutional rights, which is to say you don't need government's permission to speak, to assemble, to worship or not worship as you choose. As a human being, you have rights that are inherent and inalienable. Sometimes I do it this way, and don't be alarmed, it's just one button. For those of you in the back, I'm pointing at my belly button. If you're too shy to check in the public place, please go home tonight. Make sure you have one. Because if you do, you too have human rights. In other words, by virtue of being a human being, you have rights that are sacred and sacrosanct. Your rights are not subject to the political process. Your rights are not subject to laws. And in fact, if any law infringes upon your rights, the law is wrong, not you, and you ought to be able to go into court to overturn a law that violates your constitutional rights or prevents you from exercising your rights. You see how important that is? And you see how critical it is that we do not allow the court to make up out of whole cloth the idea that corporations have constitutional rights. Because corporations are artificial entities. They are fictions that are there and designed to do nothing more than to engage in commerce. And as David will often tell you, I will often tell you, we support commerce. We think commerce is a very important part of the human condition. And corporations as tools and instruments are perfectly valid ways to do commerce. But they don't have constitutional rights. Period. Full stop. There cannot be any qualifier to that concept because they're just creatures of the law, nothing more, nothing less. So we saw that the court had taken that doctrine, corporate constitutional rights, and then merged it with money as speech. Money is not speech, it's property. And with that property, you can buy microphones and speakers that can make your voice so loud and so powerful that you drown out the rest of society. You basically make public discourse impossible. And you can also now begin to buy up all the radio time and the airtime. Another trick that they're beginning to do now is literally to buy up the ad time even before the campaign begins so that the entire narrative is done. So the court in Citizens United put these two doctrines together, merged them, fused them, and basically opened up the floodgates to money in elections. Let's be honest, we don't have elections, we have auctions. The billionaire, Bernie Sanders is right, the billionaire class is trying to basically buy elections, no doubt about it. And we know that these large corporations are not merely exercising power today, they're ruling us. Again, to steal a line, I mean, corporations rule the world. Because unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling us. They're making the decisions. They're deciding how much poison is in the air and the water, whether we get health care or not, whether this country goes to war. Corporations are making those decisions. Well, I'm here to say, Move to Amend is here to say, ya basta, enough already. We don't have to put up with this any more than the American revolutionaries did. We don't have to put up with this any more than the abolitionists did, or the women's suffrage movement did, or the trade union movement, or the civil rights movement, or the LGBTQ movement. See, the point I'm making is, if we start thinking about ourselves as a democracy movement that is the narrative, the big picture of a set of values based on love and compassion and life, then we put ourselves on a side that cannot lose. And that's actually what we ought to be doing. So Move to Amend began in 2010. We were 12 people in a living room. Today, we're 400,000 people, and we're growing every day. Right? And with the exception of Yes Magazine, almost never covered in any media, certainly not the corporate media, and rarely even covered in other media sources. I want to acknowledge that Yes Magazine has covered us, which puts us in them and us in a certain narrative, right? But the point is, we're growing as an organization and in a movement, and we have a campaign that's actually winning. So Move to Amend was 12 people, we're 400,000 now, and you know what we've done in those few years? We've helped 600 communities pass resolutions of support of the Move to Amend campaign, where city council members or county commissioners actually vote in support, and that's fine. You know what's better? 16 states have passed resolutions of support for Move to Amend. I can't wait to be part of the celebration when Washington is 17. And Move to Amend has helped to put this issue on the ballot in over 300 communities. So not just city council members voting, but ordinary people voting on behalf of it. Move to Amend was on the ballot in over 300 different communities. Guess how many times we've won? 300. Over 300. We haven't lost yet. Think about that. And yes, that includes San Francisco, California, and Boston, Massachusetts, and Madison, Wisconsin. You know, the liberal bastions. You know where else we win? Salt Lake City, Utah. We won in Devlin, Wisconsin. Why am I mentioning Devlin, Wisconsin? Because that, my friends, is the hometown of Republican Tea Party Governor Scott Walker. where they haven't voted for a Democrat for president or Congress in over 40 years. Move to Amend was on the ballot in Devlin, Wisconsin, and we won. Move to Amend was on the ballot in Montana in a statewide initiative. Yes, that Montana. We won 74% of the vote. Right? Let that sink in, because what I'm telling you is it's not a talking point. The objective reality is that principled liberals and principled conservatives are uniting around the principles associated with Move to Amend, because we're not a policy proposal that there can be disagreements about. There are going to be disagreements about policy proposals, and that's what it's as it should be. We should debate policy proposals. But when you're talking about principles and values of sovereignty and self-government, there is basic unanimous agreement in this country. And the Move to Amend proposed amendment, and I hope that everybody will make sure to get a brochure so you can see the congressional campaign and the congressional proposal that's been out. It is very clear: artificial entities don't have constitutional rights. Money is not speech. And that is uniting liberals and conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, Greens, Libertarians, Independents, Moderates. I sometimes say cowboys and hippies, gun toters and vegans. Right? You think of the constituency, and I'm here to tell you that people come together at Move to Amend, and that's what brings me to WAMEND. Because WAMEND is the single most important thing that's going on right now in the Move to Amend national orbit. It's happening in Washington State because WAMEND has taken those two principles and added two more that are very important. First, corporations are not people. Second, money is not speech. Third, a specific explanation that all campaign contributions must be disclosed, so no more dark money in any way, shape, or form. Good job, WAMEND, to make... I gotta tell you, I don't mind being pushed. They made it better. And the fourth one, an explicit, clear statement that local, state, and federal government have the authority and the responsibility to regulate the expenditures and protect the integrity of the elections through reasonable campaign finance laws. Just that simple. Those are the four things. Yeah, right? It's very clear. It's very explicit. And it's going to get... The question is not whether or not it wins. If Montana passed it, Washington State will pass it. The question is, are we going to be able to get it on the ballot? And that's why I'm going to bring up my friend Gabe Meyer of WAMEND, Initiative 735, to tell you how it's going to happen.
Thank you. Who here wants to overturn Citizens United? Who here wants to overturn Citizens United? Cheers a little bit. Who here wants to help WAMEND get on the ballot so in 2016 we can be the 17th state to declare that corporations are not people and money is not speech? Thank you. I am here tonight to tell you that WAMEND can announce that we've gathered over 1/3 of the signatures needed. We're now at 110,000 signatures, all through volunteers just like you, to make sure that people of Washington State get to vote on this. So 110,000 signatures in the door. Let's celebrate for that. We are doing this through people like you, through everyday citizens who are both giving money and giving time to make sure that we can take our country back. It is a long process. Last year, it was much more of a sprint. It was an initiative to the people. There was a lot of people who worked really hard. They came up short, but guess what? They set the foundation. So now we have chapters in 24 cities around the state. David and I, this is our 5th stop in 8 days. We're going night after night after night after night, from Vancouver to Olympia to Everett to Spokane. And we're meeting people like you who are excited to help get this on the ballot.